Olivia Carter had planned everything down to the second. She had triple-checked her itinerary. The 8 a.m. flight to New York was her ticket to the most crucial meeting of her career, a $3 million deal that would cement her name among the top players in the industry. She arrived at the airport early, her carry-on bag slung over one shoulder, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who had worked tirelessly to get to this moment. But then, everything unraveled. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no reservation under your name." The airline attendant's words struck like a punch to the gut. Olivia blinked, gripping the counter as if she could steady the ground beneath her. "That's not possible," she said, keeping her voice calm. "Check again." The woman behind the counter frowned but nodded, typing away at her keyboard. Olivia tapped her fingers against the polished surface, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe the reservation was under her full name instead of the usual shorthand. There had to be a reasonable explanation. A few agonizing seconds passed before the attendant looked up, shaking her head. "I've checked twice. There's no flight under Olivia Carter for today." A sharp pulse of panic shot through her, but she forced it down. This was not happening. She had the confirmation email, the receipt, everything. She pulled out her phone, scrolling quickly. There. The flight details were right in front of her, crystal clear. She tapped the call button, her thumb pressing down harder than necessary. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, smooth, controlled, and dripping with carefully crafted concern. "Oh no, Olivia. That's strange. I booked it myself. Let me check." Samantha Hayes. Olivia's jaw clenched so tight it ached. She could picture her perfectly, leaning back in her ergonomic chair at the office, sipping her overpriced latte, her perfectly manicured nails tapping idly against her desk. Enjoying every second of this. This wasn't an accident. It was never an accident with Samantha. The missing reports. The accidental email deletions. The misunderstandings that always seemed to tip the scales in her favor. And now, this. Olivia exhaled slowly, her grip tightening around her phone. She could feel the heat of the attendant's gaze, the murmurs of travelers shifting around her, the distant hum of boarding announcements echoing through the terminal. Reacting now would be playing into Samantha's hands. Instead, Olivia let out a soft, almost amused breath. "No need," she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "I'll handle it myself." She ended the call before Samantha could respond. She wasn't going to argue. She wasn't going to beg. Samantha had just declared war. And Olivia had no intention of losing. She stepped outside, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she pulled up her rideshare app. The cool morning air wrapped around her, but the fire burning inside her chest didn't dim. Samantha thought she had one. She thought this cheap stunt would be enough to keep Olivia out of the game. What she didn't realize was that Olivia never played by the rules. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, and she slid into the back seat, already dialing another number. "Mark, I need the jet." A pause. Then, her assistant's surprised voice on the other end. Wait, you mean your jet?" "Yes," she said, shifting in her seat. "Wheels up in an hour." Mark let out a low whistle. "Guessing this isn't a last-minute vacation?" Olivia's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "Not exactly." She hung up, then sent a quick text to her contacts in New York. "Flight delay. Expected arrival noon. Hold meeting until I land." She wouldn't let Samantha win. Not today. Not ever. Samantha leaned back in her chair, watching the city skyline from her office. She imagined Olivia standing at that airport counter, frustration simmering beneath her professional exterior. She could almost hear the clipped, controlled tone of her voice. It was satisfying. She had spent the last year working to make Olivia look incompetent, and now, she had managed to shut her out of the biggest deal of the year. By the time Olivia figured things out, it would be too late. Samantha would already be sitting at the negotiation table, presenting the finalized strategy. The executives would see her as the one who had everything under control, the one who could deliver. It was perfect. Her phone buzzed. A message from a colleague. Carter's flight got cancelled? Damn. Looks like it's all yours now. Samantha smirked. Exactly. She turned back to her laptop, pulling up the presentation. It wasn't that Olivia wasn't talented, she was. But she was also reckless, too ambitious for her own good. And in this world, people like Olivia burned out. Samantha? She was still rising. Olivia stepped onto the private jet, fastening her seatbelt as the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Miss Carter, will be in the air shortly. New York arrival estimated at 11:45 a.m. She nodded, her gaze fixed out the window. Samantha thought she had one. That she had taken her out of the game. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Olivia tapped her fingers against the armrest, mind already moving 2 steps ahead. First, she would make it to New York. Then, she would take back what was hers. And when she was done, Samantha would regret ever crossing her. Game on. The jet sliced through the sky, a silent predator gliding toward its target. Inside, Olivia Carter sat poised, the city lights of New York beginning to flicker in the distance. The flight had been smooth, but her mind wasn't. Every fiber of her being pulsed with the knowledge that Samantha was already moving. By the time Olivia touched down, the meeting would be starting. The executives, men who valued punctuality and control, would be watching. If Samantha framed this just right, they might start to see Olivia as a liability. And that? That would be a problem. She reached for her phone. Time for a counterstrike. Samantha leaned forward at the conference table, exuding quiet confidence. The room was sleek, all glass walls and modern design, perched high above Manhattan. Across from her sat Thomas Grayson, the CEO, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and known for being ruthless in business. Next to him, a handful of executives, their expressions unreadable. Perfect. Samantha kept her tone measured, professional. It's unfortunate Olivia couldn't make it. I know how much she wanted to be here. A carefully chosen phrase. Not an outright lie. Just enough to plant a seed. Grayson frowned slightly, but he said nothing. Samantha continued, sliding a document forward. I took the liberty of compiling the final projections. The numbers are strong, and I believe we're in a position to close this today. One of the executives nodded, flipping through the pages. Samantha kept her expression neutral, but inside, she was smiling. If she locked this in before Olivia arrived, it would be over. Then. A chime. A message. The executive checking his phone looked up. Olivia just landed. The energy in the room shifted. Samantha's fingers tightened slightly against the polished wood of the table. So. She made it. No matter. It was still her game. The moment Olivia stepped off the jet, she was already in motion. Cars waiting outside, Miss Carter, her driver called, holding the door open. She slid inside, barely pausing as she dialed Mark. Tell me, she said. She's in there now, her assistant answered. Already pitching the deal. A slow inhale. Olivia's grip on the phone tightened. Then we're doing this my way. The car sped through Manhattan, weaving through traffic as she spoke. Send them the revised report, now. The one with the updated projections. Make sure Grayson sees it before I walk in. Got it. And Mark? Yeah? Keep her talking. Samantha was mid-sentence when the executive's phone lit up again. A pause. A glance at the screen. Then, Grayson's voice, calm but firm. Hold on. I want to see this. A document appeared on the conference screen, Olivia's revised report, sharp and comprehensive, with updated figures Samantha hadn't accounted for. A subtle shift in the air. Grayson's expression remained unreadable, but the fact that he'd stopped the meeting to review it meant one thing: he was listening. And then the door opened, and Olivia Carter walked in. Samantha kept her face neutral, but inside, she seethed. Olivia should have been scrambling, desperate. But no, she walked in as if she owned the room. As if nothing had ever been out of her control. "Apologies for the delay," Olivia said smoothly, setting her bag down. "But I wouldn't miss this for the world." Then, she turned toward Grayson. "Shall we begin?" Game on. The jet sliced through the sky, a silent predator gliding toward its target. Inside, Olivia Carter sat poised, the city lights of New York beginning to flicker in the distance. The flight had been smooth, but her mind wasn't. Every fiber of her being pulsed with the knowledge that Samantha was already moving. By the time Olivia touched down, the meeting would be starting. The executives, men who valued punctuality and control, would be watching. If Samantha framed this just right, they might start to see Olivia as a liability. And that would be a problem. She reached for her phone. Time for a counterstrike. Samantha leaned forward at the conference table, exuding quiet confidence. The room was sleek, all glass walls and modern design, perched high above Manhattan. Across from her sat Thomas Grayson, the CEO, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and known for being ruthless in business. Next to him, a handful of executives, their expressions unreadable. Perfect. Samantha kept her tone measured, professional. "It's unfortunate Olivia couldn't make it. I know how much she wanted to be here." A carefully chosen phrase. Not an outright lie. Just enough to plant a seed. Grayson frowned slightly, but he said nothing. Samantha continued, sliding a document forward. "I took the liberty of compiling the final projections. The numbers are strong, and I believe we're in a position to close this today." One of the executives nodded, flipping through the pages. Samantha kept her expression neutral, but inside, she was smiling. If she locked this in before Olivia arrived, it would be over. Then. A chime. A message. The executive checking his phone looked up. Olivia just landed. The energy in the room shifted. Samantha's fingers tightened slightly against the polished wood of the table. So. She made it. No matter. It was still her game. The moment Olivia stepped off the jet, she was already in motion. "Cars waiting outside, Miss Carter," her driver called, holding the door open. She slid inside, barely pausing as she dialed Mark. "Tell me," she said. "She's in there now," her assistant answered. "Already pitching the deal." A slow inhale. Olivia's grip on the phone tightened. "Then we're doing this my way." The car sped through Manhattan, weaving through traffic as she spoke. "Send them the revised report, now. The one with the updated projections. Make sure Grayson sees it before I walk in." "Got it." "And Mark?" "Yeah?" "Keep her talking." Samantha was mid-sentence when the executive's phone lit up again. A pause. A glance at the screen. Then, Grayson's voice, calm but firm. "Hold on. I want to see this." A document appeared on the conference screen, Olivia's revised report, sharp and comprehensive, with updated figures Samantha hadn't accounted for. A subtle shift in the air. Grayson's expression remained unreadable, but the fact that he'd stopped the meeting to review it meant one thing: he was listening. And then. The door opened. And Olivia Carter walked in. Samantha kept her face neutral, but inside, she seethed. Olivia should have been scrambling, desperate. But no, she walked in as if she owned the room. As if nothing had ever been out of her control. Apologies for the delay, Olivia said smoothly, setting her bag down. But I wouldn't miss this for the world. Then, she turned toward Grayson. Shall we begin? Game on. Days passed in a blur of meetings and strategic calls for Olivia. Her victory at the table was still fresh in her mind, the taste of triumph bittersweet. But there was no time to savor it. The demands of the company continued, and the gears of corporate life never stopped turning. The deal was signed, and Olivia had solidified her place at the top. Or so she thought. But in the corners of her mind, something nagged at her. Samantha's eyes, cold and full of fury, still haunted her thoughts. Olivia had watched her storm out of the boardroom, but what followed had been almost as chilling as the loss Samantha had suffered. There was something about the way she carried herself now, the look on her face when she realized she had been outmaneuvered. It wasn't just defeat. It was something deeper, darker. For the first time in a long while, Olivia found herself looking over her shoulder. Samantha wasn't done. Samantha had retreated into the shadows for now. There was no dramatic confrontation, no immediate retaliation. Instead, she disappeared from view. Olivia thought she had escaped her once and for all. But beneath that calm exterior, Samantha was carefully laying the groundwork for her comeback, biding her time. She knew the corporate world was a battleground, and she wasn't about to leave without her own victory. It started subtly, an offhand comment in a meeting here, a strategic alliance with a key player there. Samantha didn't attack head-on. She was smarter than that. She knew that if she came at Olivia directly, she would only be playing into her hands. Instead, she focused on building momentum from behind the scenes. The first sign of trouble came when Olivia's phone buzzed late one night. The text was brief, but its content hit like a ton of bricks. Don't get too comfortable. The clock's ticking. Olivia stared at the message, an odd feeling crawling up her spine. It was unsigned, but there was no mistaking who it was from. She felt an almost imperceptible shift in the air around her, a tension she hadn't noticed before. She had grown complacent. Too sure of herself. And now, Samantha was coming for her. The next day, a report hit Olivia's desk. At first glance, it seemed like just another set of routine numbers, the kind she was used to scrutinizing every day. But there was something off. As she dug deeper, the numbers didn't align. Data points didn't match. Historical trends were manipulated to create an illusion of success. It was a sophisticated attempt to undermine her work. And the deeper she went, the clearer it became, someone was trying to make her look bad. The name on the report? Samantha's team. At first, Olivia wasn't sure whether this was an isolated incident or part of something bigger. But she knew one thing, Samantha was playing a long game. Olivia had already bested her in the boardroom once. Now, Samantha was hitting her where it hurt, the core of Olivia's reputation. She wasted no time. Olivia called in her trusted team. She wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't going to let Samantha's shadow loom over her success. She began assembling a counter-report, one that would not only expose the flaws in Samantha's work but also reaffirm her own position as the company's indisputable leader. She knew how to play the game, and she was playing it with precision. But Samantha wasn't just going to let Olivia take control. She had learned from her past mistakes. Samantha had already anticipated Olivia's every move. She had covered her tracks, made sure to work in the quiet spaces of the company. There was no one to point the finger at. No paper trail that could trace back to her. She had learned how to play Olivia's game, but she was adding her own rules. Olivia was in a race against time. Each moment she spent building her counter-report, Samantha was working in parallel, gaining ground, positioning herself for the final strike. Olivia had no idea, but Samantha had already started to garner support among the other executives. She had quietly planted the seeds, made the calls, formed the alliances. And now, those executives were beginning to see the cracks in Olivia's carefully constructed image. The tipping point came when Olivia was called into an emergency board meeting. When she walked into the conference room, she saw the faces of her colleagues, the ones who had once been her staunchest supporters. They no longer looked at her the same way. Their expressions were neutral, even cold. Samantha had struck at the heart of Olivia's support network. Grayson was the first to speak, his voice steady but carrying an edge of concern. "Olivia, we've reviewed your recent proposals, and we have some concerns." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She had worked for months on the latest project, carefully constructing a strategy that she believed would take the company to new heights. But now, in front of her, Grayson and the others were questioning her. The very same numbers that had been lauded just weeks ago were now being dissected under a microscope. "Concerns about the projections," Grayson continued, "and your ability to adapt to market shifts. We've been reviewing the reports, and there seems to be some inconsistencies, especially regarding risk management." Olivia's pulse quickened. She had seen this before. It was the same pattern as before, undermining her work, making her seem unreliable. And the person behind it all was too damn clever to be caught. "Samantha." Olivia tried to maintain her composure, speaking calmly as she explained the methodology behind her calculations. But deep inside, she knew the walls were closing in. The executives were no longer seeing her as the leader, they were seeing the flaws, the weaknesses. And they had already started distancing themselves from her. As the meeting dragged on, it became painfully clear. Olivia's grip on the company was slipping. Every justification she gave was met with doubt, every defense seemed weak in the face of the evidence that had been presented. She had underestimated Samantha's ability to strike from the shadows, and now, Olivia was paying the price. By the time the meeting concluded, Olivia had lost her footing. Grayson and the others exchanged a few hushed words before turning their attention back to her. "We'll need to reassess your position," Grayson said, his voice carefully neutral. It was the final blow. Samantha had succeeded. Olivia was no longer the clear leader in the eyes of the board. Samantha's plan had worked to perfection. Olivia had been exposed, but she hadn't just lost the battle, she had lost everything. And now, as Olivia stepped out of the room, her mind raced. This was far from over. Samantha had played the long game, but Olivia was a fighter. She wouldn't go down without a final strike. The game was shifting again, and this time, Olivia wasn't going to let anyone take what was hers. Weeks had passed since the boardroom meeting, but Olivia could still feel the sting of defeat. Her company, once her empire, now seemed like it was slipping through her fingers. The support she had once counted on was waning, replaced by whispers in hallways, pointed glances, and hushed conversations that ended the moment she entered the room. The people who had once trusted her, who had followed her lead with unwavering loyalty, were now questioning her every decision. But Olivia was not one to go down quietly. No, she was a strategist. A leader. And the last thing she was going to do was roll over and give up. Her first step was to find out exactly how deep Samantha's influence had gone. It wasn't enough that Samantha had weakened her position within the board, she needed to know who was behind the insidious campaign that had been aimed at her. Olivia spent long nights in her office, combing through emails, financial records, and personnel files. She knew that the key to everything was in the details, the smallest gaps in the narrative that Samantha had built. And there it was. A series of communications between Samantha and several key players in the company, some of whom had been longtime allies of Olivia. The language was subtle but clear, they had all been under Samantha's sway for months, slowly turning the tide against Olivia, one calculated move at a time. It was a masterful campaign of influence, Samantha's brilliance was undeniable. But there was one thing Olivia hadn't noticed until now, a pattern of connections, people and places she hadn't expected. Samantha had been playing the long game all along, slowly building her own network of power, using everyone from junior executives to department heads to form a loyal following. She wasn't just fighting for control of the company, she was building her own base. Olivia's blood boiled with a mix of rage and admiration. Samantha was a true threat. But this only made Olivia more determined. If she wanted to reclaim control, she needed to do what she did best, fight back with intelligence, precision, and a little bit of the unpredictability that had gotten her to the top in the first place. Her first move was to target the weak link in Samantha's network. Samantha had become too confident, too sure that her position was unshakable. But Olivia knew the board members who were still loyal to her, those who had been wavering but hadn't yet made a final decision. These were the people who were crucial to her comeback. She set her sights on them. Olivia began to carefully plant the seeds of doubt, revealing the cracks in Samantha's strategies. She exposed flaws in Samantha's recent deals, highlighting inconsistencies and raising questions about her ability to handle high-stakes negotiations. She used subtlety and precision to begin undermining Samantha's credibility. One by one, Olivia won over the skeptics, pointing out not just her own accomplishments but also Samantha's missteps. The tide was starting to turn. Meanwhile, Samantha wasn't idle. She could feel the shift in the air. Her allies were beginning to look over their shoulders, questioning their loyalty. The whispers Olivia had begun to spread were starting to stick. Samantha had made her own preparations, knowing that Olivia was too dangerous to leave unchecked. She began to shore up her position, rallying her remaining supporters and preparing for a final confrontation. Samantha called a private meeting with the core of her supporters, those she trusted the most. She knew that Olivia was not someone who would simply surrender her position. Olivia would fight with everything she had. But Samantha had anticipated this, and her next move would solidify her control. She had one final card to play. "Olivia thinks she can play this game," Samantha said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "But she doesn't understand the rules. This company isn't about who's the loudest or the most visible. It's about loyalty. It's about connections. And I've built a network that can't be broken." Her supporters nodded in agreement, their faces a mask of determination. Samantha's plan was already in motion. But now, it was time to strike when Olivia least expected it. The final showdown took place during the company's quarterly review meeting. Olivia entered the room, confident but wary. She knew that this would be the moment either she reclaimed control or Samantha would secure her dominance once and for all. The room was filled with tension, the air thick with the weight of unspoken decisions. Samantha sat at the far end of the table, her eyes locked on Olivia with a quiet, deadly intensity. There was no longer a need for subtlety. This was it, the last move, the final battle. Grayson, who had once been one of Olivia's most trusted allies, opened the meeting with a formal agenda. Olivia scanned the room, counting the faces she recognized. There were fewer of them than there had been before. The defections had started, and the balance of power had shifted. But she wasn't backing down. She wasn't going to let Samantha win without a fight. As the meeting progressed, Samantha remained calm, her posture poised and calculated. But Olivia could feel the weight of every word, every glance. And then, just as the conversation turned toward new company initiatives, Samantha made her move. "Before we continue," Samantha said, her voice smooth and confident, "I think we need to revisit the matter of leadership. We all know that the company is going through a period of significant change. We need someone who can take us forward." The room fell silent. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to show any sign of weakness. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. "I believe," Samantha continued, her gaze never leaving Olivia's, "that the company needs a leader who can stabilize the situation, someone who has the vision to guide us through uncertain times. Someone who understands what it means to build long-term success." It was a direct challenge. Olivia's grip tightened on the edge of the table, her mind racing. This was not a moment for hesitation. She stood, meeting Samantha's eyes with equal intensity. "I built this company into what it is today," Olivia said, her voice steady, but the fire beneath it undeniable. "And I will not let anyone tear it down." The room was on edge as the two women faced off, their battle of wills clear for all to see. In that moment, the weight of their shared history, the betrayals, the alliances, the power struggles, all of it hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Samantha smiled, the corner of her lips curling up in quiet triumph. She had played the game and was poised to win. But Olivia wasn't finished. She would fight. She would claw her way back, using every skill, every trick she had learned over the years. The game wasn't over. Not yet.